This is a response to the Stefan Molyneux Freedom Domain Radio Introduction to Philosophy podcast. Knowledge 2 of 3 is the label. I just wanted to point out briefly, very, very interesting. He begins this podcast asking his listeners, me, to imagine a conversation between two scientists. One of the scientists is asserting that gravity will cause the orange to fall down, and the second scientist is asserting that the orange will fall sideways or up or whatever. And from this model, or he will use this model to, but this model is important to him, and he'll come back to it several times. He'll imagine two scientists in a room having a discussion about something, and then because that discussion will occur a certain way, then because of that, then this other thing that he was talking about previously, before he went to talking about those two scientists in the room, will follow. Big problem. And so it's a good example here of this at 3 minutes. And the reason why, and if you ever find anybody trying to do that to you, because of this thing that would happen, this would happen this way over here, and so therefore that should happen over here, what we're talking about. I'd like to just point out, and you have to really, it takes a lot of practice and it's hard work, and that's what philosophy is about. You have to think about these thoughts, and you have to develop your brain to be able to do it. But, if you do the work, you can get there. You just point out and say, man, this is not a conversation that two reasonable scientists would be having on planet Earth in the 21st century, or the 20th century, or even the 19th century, whatever. But no two scientists would sit in a room and disagree about how the forces of gravity, while they're both on planet Earth, would affect an orange. There are no two scientists that would have that debate. It's just absurd. And so what he's doing, and what he does often, is he'll imagine two scientists in a room and say, well, imagine if two scientists were sitting around talking about this. And if they were talking about it this way, then this scientist, because of this reason, would win, right? And you say, yeah. He says, okay, well, because of that, what we were talking about over here, that's why what I'm saying is true. Wait, hold on a second. Your two scientists in a room over there are talking about whether an orange would fall down or whether an orange falls sideways. And oftentimes it's a big split. When you imagine the two scientists in the room talking to each other, oftentimes they're talking about a physical law. And then the other thing, that's another thing you'll find, that's one of the gateways I usually try to sneak it in, is that the topic you're talking to him about is not anything about physical laws. It might be about social laws, if you want to invent such a thing, or economic laws or whatever, but you're not sitting around talking about how, the second law of thermodynamics is going to operate on some material body, because we as human beings, believe it or not, we've pretty much got that figured out. So, let's stop imagining two scientists in a room having a discussion that two scientists in a room would never have. And let's stop using that conversation that two scientists would never have as a reason to believe some very, very controversial, inhuman position on some other crazy part of planet Earth discourse, over here, whatever you're talking about. So that's a good example of that. I'm coming back with some more examples, but that's one good example I just found of how he really will try to snake you over in a very, very solipsistic way. Is to say, imagine two scientists in a room talking about, one says an orange drops, one says an orange goes sideways. Two scientists would never have that conversation. And so, I just need to point that out. Very, very fundamental. Up with more in a moment.